Before we actually go into the meeting, just want to apologise. For some reason, I've tried to log in through my laptop tonight, and it's gone into BitLocker recovery mode for some unknown reason, no idea why. So I've had to log on through my iPad, but at the moment, for some reason, it's not coming up with my function at the top that I can actually see people who want to speak. So the officers, Gareth and Catherine, are going to keep an eye on anybody who does want to speak. I've got most people up there, so if you put your hand up, I can sort of catch you that way. So hopefully between us all, I'll make sure then we get everybody in there who wants to speak. So if you could just bear with us, it's in our eventuality. Okay, so please can I remind all participants that this meeting will be recorded and copy archived for future viewing. Could all participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? And if you wish to speak, I say, can you please put your hand up if they can be seen on screen, or use the chat function, which at the moment I can't access. So that might not be the best method for this evening. But if you could indicate, put your hand up or put the little hand up as well, that would be really useful. So I do apologise for that. If anyone has any difficulty hearing or being heard when they're addressing the committee, can you let either myself or the officers know? And then if you've got a webcam, then try turn that off, and this will help with the broadband or the Wi-Fi bandwidth. So at least we should be able to hear and be heard. But hopefully there won't be any other hiccups tonight. So I'd like to welcome to all committee members and officers. And any members of the public who have joined us. I'm not sure that there are. I'd like to welcome you to the Environmental Regeneration Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday, the 15th of December at 6 p.m. So I'll go straight into the first item, which is number 1, which is apologies for absence.
Cool.
So do we have any?
None, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, was that somebody who wanted to speak? No? Okay, move on to item number 2 then, which are the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of November 2020. Could I ask if we agree to approve those minutes, please? Can I have
Yeah, fine by me.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then item number 3 then, which is to receive declarations of interest, including whipping declarations of the Council's Code of Conduct. So do we have any? No? Lovely. Right, so moving on to item number 4 then, which is a reference from Scrutiny, and this is developing a climate change action plan, which is at the Cabinet on the 2nd of November this year. So I'm not sure who's actually going to present this.
It's Tom.
I'm going to take that if that's okay.
It's Tom, that's absolutely fine. Sorry, Tom. Okay, so Tom, would you like to take us through that report, please?
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks very much for having me this evening, committee. If it's okay with you, I've got a presentation of the report that went to Cabinet. It's just a little bit more interesting for you to see. So I'll share that if that's okay. Can I just double check that you can see that okay? Great stuff. Okay, so this is a reference, as you were just saying, Councillor Brooks, from Cabinet. They've asked for us to seek views on how the work to progress the climate change action plan is progressing. So that's the reason for bringing it here. We've also distributed that report to the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee and all town and community councils in the Vale as well. So thinking back to July 2019, it seems like a long time ago now, and the world has changed quite a bit. But the council declared a climate emergency, and it had 4 provisions or 4 elements to that emergency. One was to seek to reduce the council's carbon emissions to net zero before the 2030 Welsh Government target. It also contained a provision to make representations to various governments to make sure that we have the right powers, resources and support available to support us in meeting that 2030 target. Commitment to work with partners across the region and also to work with local stakeholders, so obviously including yourselves as elected members, but also all our residents, young people, businesses and other relevant parties to develop a strategy. So that's the reason for bringing that to committee this evening and to Cabinet in November. And I think it's really important to recognise that work in this area for the Vale is not from a standing start. The report that went to Cabinet lists a myriad of different things that have been happening over recent years, including things like the fact that we purchase 100% of our electricity from renewable sources. There's photovoltaic panels, so solar panels on 13 of our sites. The dock office heating is done via biomass. There's a huge amount of work in terms of biodiversity. Emma, who is presenting later, has led around the Green Link service, the e-bikes, the amount of sustainable travel. So there's a huge amount of work that has already been underway. And the 23rd of March of this year was going to be known for the fact that we were taking a report to Cabinet about developing a climate change action plan. We'd had discussions at the Public Services Board about developing a climate change charter, and on the 23rd of March we presented a report to Cabinet at 2 o'clock asking for permission to go out and have a community conversation about climate change. Another gentleman made an announcement at 7 o'clock that evening, which somewhat changed the way that the next few months kind of went. But I think it is important for committee to note that work in this area didn't stop during lockdown and the subsequent months in the autumn. Colleagues have led to continue the improvements to street lighting, most recently the rollout of the new recycling arrangements within Barry from October that Emma's led on. Marcus's area in terms of supplementary planning guidance has continued to support this agenda. The work undertaken on the 21st Century Schools programme, there have been some delays but not significantly. Improvements to the housing stock have continued. Promotion of active travel, especially seeing the way that people's travel patterns have changed, and also a continuation of the tree and wildflower planting programme. So a lot of work has continued. And as part of our coronavirus recovery strategy, which committee saw last month or in October, there are a series of strategic recovery priorities for the organisation linked to climate change. Some of them are listed on this screen here, but of particular relevance to your committee: the support for a green recovery and a refocus of the capital programme supporting economic growth, active travel, again, how we re-energise that commitment around reduction, reuse and recycling, and supporting people to work from home and through means of digital service delivery. So we're building here a picture of how, as an organisation, we're responding to this agenda. But there are some other important things to reflect on. Sophie Howe, the Future Generations Commissioner, published her first annual report, and that contains a series of challenges and commitments for public bodies in this area. And the Public Services Board, as part of its recovery planning, has also discussed and most recently agreed a draft charter for climate change. So colleagues from the Council have sought to bring this all together under these 7 themes, and this is really a way of us starting to kind of structure our thinking in the area of climate change. So looking at issues such as energy, how we use technology, the purchasing power that we have as a local authority, the importance of our community leadership, thinking about how we travel, reducing waste and promoting recycling, and also how we go about managing our land and buildings to benefit the environment. So these 7 issues have been brought together as live discussion papers, and I'll provide these slides to Gareth to disseminate to committee after the meeting if that's useful, so that you can see exactly what kind of evidence we're looking at. And these discussion papers set out ultimately what are we trying to achieve, so what's the ambition, where are we currently, how does it link with lots of the different agendas in this particular area, some risks to delivering that ambition, and it starts to identify some short, medium and long-term actions that could be taken. And what we've been tasked with by Cabinet is producing a climate change plan. And it would be relatively easy for the head of policy, surrounded by the head of neighbourhood services and transport and the head of planning, to come up with quite a traditional council plan that's got a series of actions and targets and measures. But I'm not sure that, to be honest, that would do justice to this piece of work. What we're keen to do is not duplicate the activity that's being led by colleagues already, but more so to bring it together so we can see how the collective action that we're taking across the organisation and with our partners really sets the tone for the work. It also feels as if this is similar to the way that we introduced the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. It needs the organisation to recognise that we need to change how we work. So it's got a cultural aspect that's consistent with our values as well. And also it needs to link with that Public Services Board climate change charter. So whilst it will have actions and measures and will provide update reports, it feels as if it needs to be bigger and more dynamic than that. So in the last couple of months, we've started to involve, engage and consult further on this. So we ran a series of internal news articles and saw comment from our colleagues during Climate Week. We've also run a series of lunchtime discussion sessions around each of those emerging themes as well, to try and elicit ideas and thoughts from our colleagues. And as of tomorrow, alongside the other consultations which are underway around the annual delivery plan, the council's budget and specific projects, we're going to be launching a consultation exercise via an open letter from the leader of the council to residents to start to get some ideas of where the community feel that we should be focusing in on our activity in this area. So the reason for bringing this, as I say, is to seek your views on what I've just described in terms of how we're progressing the agenda, and to note then that the plan is to develop this action plan to take back to Cabinet and the committee cycle in early 2021.
Okay, thank you, Tom. That was very interesting. The slides are actually very interesting, and I, for one, are heartened to see that despite the pandemic, the work has been ongoing, and you've actually managed to achieve quite a substantial amount of work within that time, which is no mean feat considering the situation. Okay, Andy, Councillor Robertson, you're waiting to speak.
Thank you, Chair. That's very interesting, Tom. I'm very, very, very keen on environmental improvements. There's an awful lot of things about man's activities that concern me. For instance, the amount of plastic which is still being produced when human beings should have stopped producing plastic by now and stopped using it to the extent they do. As far as CO2 is concerned, could you tell me what the current level of CO2 in the atmosphere is and what you think we ought to get it down to? I've got a few questions, by the way, but that's the first one.
Yeah, no, I don't have that data to hand, Councillor, but I can certainly get it from colleagues and send it to you very shortly after committee.
Well, I can tell you that the CO2 in the atmosphere is 0.04%. Man's contribution to that is basically on an annual level since about 1800 has been about 5%. So basically the CO2 in the atmosphere actually produced by human beings is 0.0016%. That is so insignificant, it's virtually not even worth thinking about. The levels of CO2 in the atmosphere are varying over a great many years. I mean, basically, if you go back to the Carboniferous, the CO2 levels in the atmosphere were about 0.6%, so more than 10 times higher than they are now. The planet didn't die. In fact, what happened was you got a vast amount of vegetative growth, huge tree ferns, etc. They collapsed when they died and formed the coal measures. The amount of CO2 that has been taken out of the atmosphere historically, geologically, is vast. It's absolutely vast. All the limestone in the world, all the coal in the world, all the oil in the world, all the chalk in the world. The White Cliffs of Dover all represent CO2 which has been taken out of the atmosphere. We're really barking up the wrong tree here. CO2 isn't actually even a particularly significant greenhouse gas. Compared with methane and compared with water vapor, CO2 is insignificant as a greenhouse gas. We're spending huge amounts of money, and our council is about to spend huge amounts of money on something which is absolutely a waste of time. The big risk to the world in what I regard as a fairly short term, I don't know what you're planning ahead for. Are we planning ahead for 5 years, 50 years, 500 years? If you're planning ahead for 5,000 years, depending on how long you think the human race is going to be around for, if you're planning it for 5,000 years and more than that, then what we should be doing is actually producing more carbon dioxide if it is a significant greenhouse gas, because we are living in an interglacial. The previous glaciation, and we know that glaciations happen in waves, and we're still in the ice ages. We just happen to be living in an interglacial. Interglacials do not last for an amazingly long time. We're 10,000 years into this one. We've probably got another 5 to 10,000 years before the ice comes back. In the last glaciation, there was 300 meters of ice on top of Merthyr Tydfil. That's what we're looking forward to. The whole reason this global warming thing came up originally was because Margaret Thatcher wanted a stick to beat the unions with, the coal mining unions with. And she found out from the Stockholm conference in 1976 that somebody had come up with a paper suggesting that carbon dioxide being released by burning coal, etc., might actually lead to global warming. What happened then is that she decided that she could, the initial paper actually said that this might actually stop the ice ages happening. This actually might be a good thing, that we might actually stop glaciation happening in the future if we carried on burning coal and oil. Margaret, bless her socks, decided that she could use this as a method of saying, we don't want to have coal anymore as a fuel because it releases so much CO2 into the atmosphere that it's going to turn the world into a desert. This is completely wrong. I mean, basically, this is a chicken licking effect. And I'm very disappointed that the human race, rather than actually going after the things that really count, like plastics, detergents do a huge amount of damage in the sea. And heavy metals that we use in our batteries, in these computers, in our mobile phones, those are the things that we should really be worrying about. Thank you very much.
Okay. Tom, did you want to respond to Councillor Robertson?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Robertson. I absolutely note the points that you've just raised, and I know that when there was the discussion at full council in terms of declaring the emergency, that was the opportunity to make a number of these points. I suppose I will take the point in terms of the planning horizon. This is a commitment to meet a target by 2030, so ergo it's a 10-year plan initially, but it inevitably will be things as a longer horizon than that. And a lot of the issues that you were just raising, whilst you maybe disagree with the carbon element of this, would be reflected in terms of this plan, in terms of things like recycling, transportation and those kind of things. So perhaps once we've started to draft the plan, we can bring that back, and we can then also have a conversation in terms of how how it will hit the other agendas that you describe, as well as the one that the administration have declared the emergency according to. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Have you got more questions, you Councillor Robertson?
I'd just like to come back on that. Basically, what I'd like to say is, I think that we're wasting an awful lot of time and money on this. The climate varies anyway. You know, in the last 1,000 years, we've had warm spells and cold spells. There's something called the mini ice age, which happened from about 1650 to about 1900. We had a climatic optimum in the early medieval period from 950 to about 1200, where the climate was actually a lot warmer than it is now. They were growing wheat on Dartmoor. There were vineyards all the way up to Northumberland. All I'm saying is that you're acting as if this is a done deal. Basically, this is really bad science. And I'm very, very worried that we're being, instead of concentrating on the things that we should be concentrating on, like cleaning up the chemical aspects, I mean, the heavy chemicals, the complex chemicals that human beings are producing and releasing into the ocean are much more worrying than carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is not something, the planet would die without carbon dioxide. Anyway, thank you. I'll shut up now.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Andy. We have been asked, we can actually feed those views back because they're looking for our views anyway. So if you're happy, I'm sure the officers have got that down. So we can include your thoughts in those views. Yeah. Okay. Right. I've got a few people waiting to speak now. So it's Councillor Morgan next.
There, you can hear me, but you can't see me. Is that?
Yeah.
You can hear me. It's a question not entirely on point, but I would thank you to Tom for the presentation, and I think this is something that we need to embrace. But I was just thinking, slightly off key, if you like, we're about to embark on the active travel consultation, which looks at how we get around, particularly in the Vale, and how we get around on foot and by bike and whatever. To a certain extent, this is concentrating on people who are commuting, perhaps. I'm not quite sure if that is, but I'm wondering whether, through looking at climate change, whether we also need to look at the way people get around just for leisure. And I'm thinking in particular of our network of country lanes, which are a pleasant place, or it should be a pleasant place for cyclists, walkers and horse riders, but the congestion of cars makes it very difficult and dangerous for those who are using the roads for leisure. And that is part of, in my view, the effect on climate change is the increase of vehicular traffic. So do we need, and again, not strictly on point, but do we need to be looking at a way of reviewing the way people use our roads anyway? Because if we're going to encourage people to use their bicycles and to walk, and indeed to allow them to use their horses, because a lot of people have come back to me on that. They said, well, in this active travel plan, why doesn't it say anything about horses? And I've been told, well, that's a leisure activity, not a means of transport, which is probably the case. But to make everything safer and healthier, should we be including in this climate change action plan, looking at the way that we use our roads for commuting, but also for leisure? That's my suggestion or comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Morgan. Did you want to add anything to that, Tom, or should we just add that into our views and to feedback?
That's
Yeah.
really useful. Thank you, Councillor Morgan.
Okay, the next speaker I've got is Councillor Sivianum Ruba.
Yeah, hello. I actually, Tom, I don't know if you can see the chat, but I did put my question in the chat. But just before I ask you that question, I do have to say that I wholly disagree with Andy's views on carbon dioxide, and it's absolute nonsense in my view. There's plenty of scientific evidence about how we as human beings are creating carbon dioxide, how it has caused the greenhouse effect. So, and this is all recorded, and I'm not going to, actually argue that here. However, my question, Tom, is I'm around the consultation. So that's good to hear about, you know, a letter from the leader going out to residents, and hopefully, you know, interested groups like Penarth Greening and so on. But really, I'm interested to know how we're going to record, you know, those views, and how we're going to actually feed them in concrete terms into, you know, our future plans on, you know, our future actions really for the council.
Okay, thank you, Rupert. Tom, did you want to respond to Rupert's question?
Yeah, it's thank you very much indeed, actually, Rupert, for the suggestion in terms of linking with specific groups. That's something we can definitely do now as we move into this first part of the consultation. The consultation enables people to provide open-ended feedback. Deliberately so. I didn't want it to be too tick boxy or too categorized. I wanted people to be able to share views that they feel, and we'll be recording all of those, and the team will go through them and look to kind of categorize and identify themes in the same way as we would do for lots of other kind of qualitative feedback. I should have stressed the point as well that this would only be the first part of that kind of consultation and engagement. I know we've spoken about other issues, and what I'm keen to do is make sure that where, as Councillor Morgan was just talking about, active travel consultation, we do lots of consultation work throughout the year that is linked to this kind of agenda. And I think what we need to be doing is finding a way of keeping up to date and on top of those views that are coming in. So that's how I see this developing over the next year or so.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I'm going to bring Councillor William. I think you were next. I think he's just disappeared a second. Stefan, did you want to speak? Right, I think I have to come back to Councillor William. Are there any other members of the committee who wish to speak who I haven't picked up? I know Councillor Burnett would like to speak, but I'll bring her in at the end, if that's okay with everybody. Oh, hang on, Councillor Williams back. Sorry, Stefan, you were next to speak. Sorry. It's all about timing, isn't it, sometimes?
Yeah, sorry about that. No, it was just basically a comment. I promised that I wouldn't rise to Andy's bait, but he does make some salient points regarding bad science. And I do agree that there are other targets, that methane, for example, is a much more potent greenhouse gas. However, it's really misleading to say, oh no, carbon dioxide is not a problem at all. You know, you just look at the increases in world population and so on. We do need to be addressing this. And I say, Andy, yes, we need to be addressing everything else as well, but we can't ignore this at all. And I'm with Rubo on this one. Thank you.
Councillor Brooks, you're muted.
Sorry, everybody. Thank you, Gareth. I think I've caught everybody now who wanted to speak on the committee. So if everybody's happy, I'm going to bring in Councillor Liz Burnett. So Liz, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think as the point was made, there was a very full and complete debate on this topic back in July last year, and with a full range of points made at that point. I don't think we're here to rehearse that discussion. What we are here to discuss is the developments that have gone forward since that day. We discussed the motion that was passed in full council, talked about not only what we do as a local authority, but how we work with our partners and the progress we've made with the PSB on this, how we will be working with our communities, and also what we will be doing to lobby and get changes where they need to happen in terms of allowing us to take forward that agenda. I think it's relevant to say, when people have said, you know, where does this sort of fit in? It actually goes right the way through our ways of working going forward. This is about our work with the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. It is better use of our resources, or of the world's resources. And it is, you know, that all fits in with the climate agenda, but it also fits in with the type of world that the residents of the Vale want to live in. And that is what has been said to us. Whether or not our towns are more green and pleasant places where people won't be choked by traffic fumes and are able to walk to their shops, or maybe get an e-bike or something like that going forward. How do people want to live? And increasingly people are telling us that they are mindful about biodiversity, they are mindful about air quality, and they are mindful about the ways in which they live. This is how we're taking it forward, and I would be really grateful if committee could make comments that help us to define that agenda as we move forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. I don't think we've got any other speakers. And Cabinet are asking for our views. I mean, we've put a few thoughts and views around. Is there anything anybody else would like to put forward to go back to Cabinet? No? Okay.
Sorry, Chair, Councillor Morgan would like to speak.
Oh, right, sorry, Councillor Morgan.
No, just one small point I missed out of my comments earlier is to also look at the provision of public transport in rural areas, because that could reduce the amount of traffic on our roads. I don't have the answer to that, but it's something that could be looked at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Morgan. Councillor Sibianian?
Yeah. Sorry, Chair, thank you. Just really on the public transport point, really. Tom, we really, it's to I suppose to ensure that we are working, you know, with Welsh Government in terms of infrastructure, because actually until infrastructure, transport infrastructure is really improved, we're not, I think we won't see kind of, you know, big enough, I guess, differences. We will see, of course we will. I think this is a really good beginning, and you know, for one, I'm proud that our council is putting this forward. So, you know, that's my main point. But I think it is really important that we need to, you know, lobby Welsh Government to ensure that, you know, we get the proper infrastructure that we need for transport in the Vale of Glamorgan.
Right, okay. Councillor John?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to mention, I think all of our departments need to look at themselves on this in the way they work. I'll just pick on one point, and that's the planning department. I think we need now to look more at biodiversity, which has already been mentioned, but also when plans come in that mean cutting a lot of trees down, are we going to go along that line, or whether we're going to say to ourselves, give more protection to trees? I mean, for example, 2 planning applications in Lantwood Major last year gave permission for 34 trees to be demolished. And there were some new ones to be planted, but yet to be planted. So basically, I brought this up at a previous meeting, you know, I think all departments need to look at themselves and say, hang on a minute, do we need to give permission for this? Because in one application there was no reason to take the trees down, they were perfectly healthy. But it was a choice of trees or 4 large houses. You know, so quite honestly, the trees have been there many, many years. A lot longer than my lifetime, and they were perfectly healthy. So I think to myself, do we need to do this? But, you know, we need, I think, now to maybe look at ourselves across departments. Maybe the decisions were right to take them down or whatever. I'm not, you know, making a fuss about the planning department, But what I'm saying is all departments need to look at themselves, because it's no good us talking about this tonight and that we're not all working and speaking from the same hymn sheet. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor John. I know that I'm not sure if Emma, you wanted to add anything to there, because I know the planning department, they do, oh sorry, Marcus, I meant, not Emma. You know, they do have a biodiversity policy, and I know that is something they look at with the environment as well. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything into that, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Not really. I think Gwyn is making the point about the loss of trees. I mean, certainly from a planning perspective, when we get planning applications, they are considered and scrutinised on, very thoroughly in respect of ecology, biodiversity, loss of habitat. You're right. We've got recently appointed a new senior ecologist in the council, Colin Cheeseman, who's very experienced. But I think there's a very valid point in what Gwyn is saying. I think all decisions the council makes need to consider the impact of the climate change upon what the decision, the outcome of those decisions will be. In terms of the loss of trees, I mean, Gwyn did there very saliently, very well point out the balancing act that has to be made between the need for more housing against the protection of the countryside, the ecology, the trees. And that's something that we are constantly doing in planning when we're making recommendations. Ultimately, those decisions are, in respect of planning applications, are in respect of private development in the main, not council development. But I think from our point of view as a council going forward, climate change will be very much at the heart of the decision-making process.
Okay, thank you for that, Marcus. And we've got a range of views in, a range of thoughts as well. So I think if the officers can sort of put all that together and then feed that back into Cabinet, I think including around, as a very valid point, I think, Councillor John, that you made around that it's actually a corporate responsibility around the environment, and that every department needs to consider it when whatever decisions they're making, whether they work internally in the council or, for instance, with planning. And I think the issues around public transport and getting people out of their cars and those congestion on the roads, obviously that's a very, very pertinent topic as well. So I think if we include those views in, we will put forward your views as well, or your thoughts, Andy, that we will put that in. But what we won't do, we want to say is the committee, if you're okay with that, because obviously there are varying views around that, and I, for one, am also very supportive of this plan as well. So I think we've got all the comments there and the thoughts, so we can refer those back to Cabinet. Is everybody happy with that? Yes? Okay. We'll move on to item number 5 then, which is the draft Vale of Glamorgan Council Annual Delivery Plan. And this is the Improvement Plan Part 1. Okay.
Thank you.
I think it's Tom again.
Yes, you've got me the second time, if that's okay, Chair. Thank you again for taking this item. As you know, we adopted a new corporate plan in April of this year. That's a 5-year plan. And one of the new things that we committed to doing was bringing an annual delivery plan to set out specifically the commitments that are going to be delivered in each of the 5 years of that corporate plan. And that was in direct response to feedback from the public and partners, who said, well, it's fine if you set out commitments for 5 years, but we want to see exactly what it is that you're committing to do in any 1 year, so that we can hold you to account for that, and we can understand the steps that you're going to take. So we currently have an annual delivery plan for the current year, but we're consulting now until the 4th of January on next year's annual delivery plan. The draft, which is included within the reference from Cabinet, has been put together over a series of sessions, and it takes into consideration the views of partners and the views of our staff. It reflects the recovery strategy that you've seen previously. It reflects the corporate risks that we're facing, and it also reflects the regulatory requirements that such a plan needs to reflect. And as usual, it's structured around the Council's 4 wellbeing objectives, and as a committee, you're very aware of the fact that your remit spans right the way across those 4 wellbeing objectives. The plan is really quite detailed, and I'm really conscious that asking your views on about 110 individual annual commitments is not the easiest thing to do as part of committee. So in addition to any views that you might have this evening, you can obviously share those views with us up until the end of the consultation period. But to give you a flavour of some of the commitments that are set out, within Objective 1, which is working with and for our communities, there are commitments around involving, engaging with public in better ways, how we use our land and property to take forward the climate change work that we were just discussing, actions around our response to Brexit, as well as developing the county in terms of its age-friendly and dementia-friendly status. The second objective is around supporting learning, employment and sustainable economic growth, which I know is a particular consideration for your committee chair. So there are actions there around Inspire to Work and Aspire to Achieve, reflecting the regional work that colleagues lead on in terms of Cardiff Capital Region and the focus on the enterprise zone, as well as the economic recovery and growth plan that I know Marcus is leading on, as well as town centre and key regeneration projects for the coming year. The third objective around supporting people at home and in their community has got a series of sustainable travel actions and commitments, as well as the work that Emma is leading in terms of regional transport, the events programme, physical activity within some of our key outdoor locations. And then finally, in terms of Objective 4, which is respect, enjoy and enhancing our environment, there are again commitments around climate change, the electrification and use of hybrid vehicles in our fleet, the completion of the street lighting LED programme, further investment in the Strong Communities Grant Fund, the Biodiversity Action Plan and the Green Infrastructure Strategy. So they're just some particular actions that you'll see within the remit of your committee, and I hope just illustrate that again it's an ambitious plan for the organisation, but it sets out the commitments for the coming year. So the next steps are that the consultation runs until the 4th of January. We'd be delighted to hear the views of members individually and from committee. We're consulting with members of the public and our partners as well during that period. And then early in the new year, we'll be taking a revised version back to the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee for their views. It'll go to Cabinet then for consideration and endorsement in March, before it goes on to full council at the end of April for final approval. And that's because of, as you mentioned, Chair, it's the Improvement Plan Part 1, which requires the council to debate and adopt.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Obviously, there's a lot of detail within that plan, and I said we have got the opportunity to respond personally as well, individually, and also there will be further sort of scrutiny then at corporate performance and resources if people wish to attend that as well. So has anybody got anything that they'd like to add to what's here? Councillor Drake?
I just wanted to make an inquiry. It was on Objective 2, Item 10, establish a one-stop stop shop. How will you achieve that? I know it says it's 2021. How will you achieve that under the present pandemic things? Because not everybody who's going to come to you has got IT experience or anything. I suppose they could do it by phone, could they?
Sorry, I couldn't get myself off mute, Councillor Drake. Yes, that's one of the, I was just desperately scrolling through as well to make sure that I was looking at the right action. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a commitment that my housing colleagues had made previously, and it is carried forward in terms of, it's an action in the current year. They have been making progress against it, but it's being carried forward into next year when, with some hope, the current restrictions that we're living with will allow that kind of face-to-face contact in addition to the digital means of communication.
Yeah. There's one other question under objective 3, item 32. You mentioned about domestic violence against women, but you don't mention anything about contacts for about men. I know it's a lot lower level, but it does happen.
Yes, you are absolutely right that that domestic abuse and domestic violence is not gender specific,
Yeah.
and I think that commitment. I'm sorry, I was just scrolling to it. I think is looking specifically about that strategy, which is specific to women, but there are commitments elsewhere within the plan, within Objective 1, to further the work of the Strategic Equalities Plan, and within that that plan, there is a very firm commitment to tackling that kind of abuse, regardless of gender.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to tick
No,
every
no.
box.
Yeah, no, it's a very, very important point.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Councillor Drake. And I know this is something we've actually discussed because it comes under the Housing Scrutiny Committee about public protection. And I know that is something that we've actually talked about there, because there is, that element is there. Yeah, as you say, the higher numbers are women, but there are also men as well. So, and that's something I think we always have to keep in mind. So, have we got any other comments at the moment? Otherwise, we're happy to accept this report, as I say, and just emphasise to everybody that you can actually respond personally up until the 4th of January. So, no, there aren't any others. Okay, thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for going through that with us. And as I said, and some councillors may very well feedback to you as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much. Good evening.
Okay, right, we'll move on to number 7 then, which is the Revenue and Capital Monitoring Budget from the 1st of April to the 30th of September.
Sorry, Chair, I think you missed an agenda item out.
All right.
Yeah, I believe it's the annual delivery monitoring report.
Oh, of course I have.
Item
Sorry.
6.
There you are. See, that was wishful thinking, wasn't it? Right, sorry, item number 6, which is the annual delivery plan monitoring report, which is Q2 performance for 2020-2021. Okay, so I think this is Emma.
It's Emma and Marcus, a joint effort, and we've got there's a joint presentation. So if I just try and display that for you now, Chair. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. So the report before you this evening is the annual delivery monitoring report for Q2. Just bear with me a minute. So despite the ongoing pandemic, the report before you still shows that the overall RAG status for the annual delivery plan is amber, with most of the objectives. So there's objectives in terms of actions, PIs, and the overall objectives, most of them still showing a static or same performance as last year. And you can see that from the little arrows there that are on the diagram. So that's good news. So this sheet here just shows what we've really achieved. So in terms of the first objective, which is working with for our communities, we've consulted with communities on developer contributions that deliver benefits, and there's some examples there of the work that's been undertaken in Bellevue Pavilion and Park, Wenvo Community Library and Hub, and also a multi-use games area at Wick and the Arcot Triangle Arts Project. The majority of staff still continue to work from home, and we're embracing the digital working practices that have really come on leaps and bounds in the last 6 to 9 months. This has had an impact in that there is a reduction in travel, printing, because we're obviously using more electronic forms of presenting information, and also building use, which has a knock-on effect for less heating, etc. We've also continued to secure our 30% average affordable housing across the Vale, and all the relevant planning applications for housing have actually included social rented housing. Sorry, I think that's right. Marcus will clarify that if that's wrong. Objective 2, support learning, employment and sustainable economic development. We've progressed with the design of low in use carbon school in St David's, with design works also commencing at St Nicholas, although there's some further work to do on that particular scheme, and Llancarvan as zero carbon schools, the first in Wales, so that's some achievement. We've determined 278 planning applications and dealt with 105 enforcement investigations in Q2. Again, a large number of planning applications and enforcement investigations despite the pandemic. The Good Shed development, award-winning Good Sheds development, was completed on time with the support of the council and targeted regional investment strategy. We've embraced the town centre's first approach, and I think that's been particularly evident over the last 6 months. As a council, we've joined together as departments to try and deliver the best outcomes for the town centres, and we've worked very, very closely with the town centre resilience forums, traders and others to try and identify the right areas that we need for investment. In terms of objective 3, that's supporting people at home and in their communities. Again, we've completed multi-use games areas in Llandoch, at Wenvo, and also in Central Park in Barry. We've improved thermal efficiency in our housing stock through the use of external wall insulation packages. And we've also recently submitted a funding bid to Welsh Government to deliver hybrid boilers to off-gas properties. This project would also support the local economy, particularly small to medium enterprises and local businesses if we were to be successful. The final objective, objective 4, is to respect, enhance and enjoy our environment. In this particular quarter, over 72% of household waste was prepared for reuse or recycled, and that exceeded the national statutory target of 64% in 2021. We're on track. We've actually implemented now, but this is obviously Q2, the new waste blueprint in Barry, an extremely successful rollout. I would almost go as far as to say seamless. And we are on track to move forward for Penarth. Awards, 24 parks and green spaces and the 2 country parks have received the prestigious Green Flag Award or the Green Flag Community Award. So again, the standards, despite the pandemic, have been upkept and gone beyond actually within our country parks and within our parks. So thanks to the parks teams for that. We've rewilded the former golf course in Portkerry. Some amazing wildlife down there now since the golf course has gone and it's been allowed to go over to nature. And we've also secured funding for greening of the Gladstone Road roundabout. We've started a joint council approach to a green infrastructure strategy, which builds on and is in close relationship to what Tom was talking about in terms of the climate strategy. And we've also started work on an tree survey. So quite a bit of progress through the pandemic. I'll hand over to Marcus now.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Chair. Yes, so the next slide, which you've got up there, just highlights obviously all the actions and measures that relate to the annual delivery plan in regard of this quarter. You'll notice that they're split into green, amber and red. Green, 36 actions or 71% are green, 4 measures, 45% are green. Amber, 7 actions or 14% and 3 measures. are amber. And then finally, red, which are actions which haven't progressed, that's 16%, or 8 actions and 2 measures, which is 22%. And underneath, it's highlighted that of the actions that have slipped, 6 of the 8 are COVID related, and only 2 are non-COVID related. And of the performance measures that have slipped, 1 of the 2 is COVID related and 1 is non-COVID related. And I'd just like to point out to members then, if you haven't worked it, you probably have worked it out, but if you wanted to see in terms of the red actions and measures what had slipped, you can just click in this presentation on that, and it takes you to the sections of the report where you can see the various actions and measures that have slipped. So moving on to slide 4, we've tried to highlight in this slide some of the areas where obviously things have slipped and maybe we do need to improve. So under objective 1, work with and for our community. Obviously, we've had difficulties with clubs and organisations. They've been unable to generate income during the pandemic, and it's presented a significant barrier to any potential asset transfer proposals. Work to involve the community and businesses in the preparation of our growth plan, which was due to have been launched, believe it or not, around about the end of March, has been delayed. We have now refocused that growth plan to a recovery and growth plan. The actions will be quite different now because of the need for rebuilding. But again, it's come at an opportune moment. It has allowed us to refocus. Under objective 2, supporting learning, employment and sustainable economic growth, momentum on inward investment promotion in the Vale as part of the city region has to a certain extent stalled because of COVID. A lot of events we were due to attend were cancelled, and there hasn't been the promotion, the ability to promote perhaps at the level we'd have liked to have done. Our events programme within the council has remained postponed indefinitely in light of the ongoing COVID restrictions, which again is a real shame, but obviously everyone will understand why that's had to happen. We've been unable to deliver our full range of business training courses. In the current climate, a lot of people and a lot of businesses are just struggling to survive, and actually they're not that interested in training courses, but we will be looking to bring these back online as soon as we can. We work very closely with Business Wales to deliver these courses, and they've been very successful in the past. And then, of course, the first lockdown has continued to have an impact on performance in Q2, on planning application performance. So it took us quite some time to get our feet under the table at home and get planning applications back being processed at the speed they would have been perhaps processed before. However, I would say we've done quite a lot of work since that time on both performance and productivity, and it's significantly improved. So in Q3, when we get those figures coming through to you, you will see, we can show considerable improvement. So that's probably down to people getting used to it, IT systems working more effectively, and that type of thing. In respect of objective 3, support for people at home and in their community, clearly the pandemic has delayed the rollout of things like the e-bike scheme, although we have purchased the electric bikes, and training will commence once the restrictions are lifted in Wales. The Green Link service has recommenced, but operates on a very reduced service. Clearly, COVID has made that very difficult, and the future of the service is currently being reviewed. The pandemic has hindered us from employing an activity-based officer to expand opportunities for physical activity at the country parks. Obviously, again, that is understandable given where we are. And the ability to deliver disabled facilities grants has been severely impacted because the client base is often vulnerable and sometimes has been shielding. And of course, people don't want our officers, our grants officers in their houses, looking through their houses at this current time. We have had some work progress since the lockdown lifted in the middle of the summer, but obviously, again, the issues that have happened since have slowed everything down. Finally, objective 4, respect and enhance and enjoy our environment. we've talked about the climate change, climate emergency, and as Tom highlighted earlier in the meeting, we were due to launch all this in March, just before the first lockdown was announced. That clearly has had an effect on our ability to take that forward. So that has been delayed by virtue of the pandemic, which is unfortunate. Work to replace 3,713 lanterns to LED has been delayed due to the pandemic. However, completion is scheduled for the end of this financial year, so that is good news, albeit it has slipped. And work to review and implement the strategies to improve air quality around schools has been put on hold as a result of the pandemic. So, some of those have been problematic, but I'm sure you can understand in the vast majority of those cases why we've been delayed and why perhaps performance hasn't got to the level where we would have liked it to got to. And then the final slide is just a little bit of a highlight of some of the recovery items that we've, as a council, undertaken in Q2. So just running through those really quickly. Staff have organised and delivered food, PPE, waste and recycling equipment throughout the Vale. Refuse collections and recycling services have continued, with the second phase of the waste collection and treatment blueprint successfully rolled out in Barry during October, and contamination was reduced by 60% in the first week. That is not to be sniffed at. Those are fantastic achievements during the pandemic to actually rolled out a whole new waste recycling service. So, things like that need to be recognised. New cafe-style licences have been introduced to allow businesses to trade on the highway and or on council land. And what should say there as well is as quickly as possible, so we do not delay these businesses. Schools transport has resumed, and school routes, and new guidance have been produced and based on national guidance. Emergency transport procedures for Yscol and Derry agreed, and PPE provided to the contractor. Additional cleaning and infection control is taking place at schools, and cleaning provision is also made available to hubs that offered childcare during the lockdown period. That is something that's going to happen again. So, those are big achievements. Working collaboratively with local businesses to ensure they can trade in a COVID-safe environment and adhering to Welsh Government regulations. And indeed, as time has gone on, ensuring an enforcement presence to monitor non-compliance. Those have been important factors. As a council, we've given rent holidays to hirers, licence holders, businesses and community groups, and sports clubs are committed to council buildings during periods when they've been unable to operate or only operate at reduced capacity. Clubs and training businesses were permitted to use public open space for their activities free of any licence or rental fees when indoor facilities were closed. Pedestrian safety controls were implemented in town centres to enable businesses to operate and to safely and to provide confidence to shoppers when we first reopened back in July. And the controls were constantly amended in consultation with traders to ensure that they were relevant and towards the end of the current period were removed entirely. And we continue to hold town centre resilience forums with local councils and retailers and hospitality businesses to keep them updated on the latest issues that are coming at us, and also what grant funding streams are available and what we as a council are doing to help support the town centres through this difficult time. So just a snapshot there of all the things we have been doing as part of a recovery. I know it feels like we get through one recovery and we're back into another period and then we're back into another recovery. I know all the officers feel like that, but it's important that we keep that wheel going, so we are always ready to work with, as a council and with the community to get out of get through the next stage of the recovery. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. Thank you for all the detail we've got around that. It's been such a difficult year, and still facing, I think, another difficult year. I don't think it's going to be done anytime soon. To be honest, despite the vaccine, this is going to take time to sort out, and for our services to recover. So I don't think there's any huge surprises within that for the items that have slipped, because there are very sound reasons around that. Okay, I've got a couple of councillors who want to speak. I've got Councillor Rowlands first, and then I've got Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair. It's just an observation. Marcus mentioned about the new signs in the town centres. Houghton Road signs have been ripped off where they've been placed and are on the road and on the pavement. So I just wanted to raise that. I don't know what the council's going to be doing to ratify that. They don't seem to be there long. I put one back up today. And I looked out earlier when I came back to the office, and it's been ripped down again. So I just wanted to raise that as a point.
Okay, thank you for that, Leighton. And I've got Councillor William next.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks. Well, I don't know if I'm taking liberties here and if this is appropriate or not, but I was firstly grateful to Emma and Marcus for their presentations, and picking up on what Emma commented on the rewilding of Porthkerry Park. This is a subject very close to my heart. I'm sure it is to all of us. It's a jewel in the crown. It's a natural park. It's what I always taunted kids in school in Cardiff for, because of course we boasted a natural park, whereas they had landscape sterile things. And I'm very concerned that we're sanitising Porthkerry Park. I've had chats with officers about this before, and of course it's only my opinion and I could be wrong, but I was wondering whether it would be, I mean, I've got concerns about the construction of many footpaths there and the planting of what I think are too many trees in an open space. I find it claustrophobic. I like an open meadow, but obviously there is a plan regarding the rewilding, but I'd like to know exactly what it is. I've never really been able to get to the bottom of it, and I was wondering perhaps would it be a good idea for committee to invite the relevant officer to update us with the progress of the rewilding and what exactly the intentions are. I hope I'm not being inappropriate here, but I think it would be a good opportunity for us to be updated, Chair.
Thank you for that, Stefan. I mean, Marcus or Emma, do you want to comment on that? I'm happy for something to come to committee. Marcus?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, quite happy. You may remember I mentioned we've got a new council ecologist, Colin Cheeseman, who's very, very experienced, and Steve Pickering, who's the Country Parks manager. I'm sure between the two of them, they'd love to come and give a presentation about the rewilding and the success that has been and continues to be. So quite happy to ask them to come and explain how that's happened, and also were we to get the additional land that's promised to us by Legal and General, what plans we have for that land as well. But indeed, for all of the park, the intention clearly from us as a team is not to create a sterile space. It's to create as countrified, is that a word? I'm not sure. Countrified a feel as possible to the country parks, so that they feel as natural and for a number of reasons, not least because actually it costs less money for us to keep it as natural as possible. So, but yes, quite happy for someone to come and talk about the rewilding. It's very much a pet project of both Steve and Colin, so they'd love to do that, I'm sure.
Thank you, Marcus. I think that would be great, especially, once we get over Christmas now and the New Year, we're going to be coming towards spring. And obviously that's the time for rejuvenation of our gardens and our open spaces as well. So that would be really good. Thank you for that. Emma, did you want to add?
Only just to say, I think it might be useful if I bring John Greatrix as well along, because obviously he's quite responsible for some of the more formal parks. But even as part of those formal parks and the highway verges, etc., we do have areas of wildflowers and rewilding, more traditional, less manicured things in those parks. So I think it would be useful if maybe it's a country park and a park presentation together, so you can get the whole picture of everything that's going on and feed in, most importantly, feed into that process if you've got ideas that maybe we haven't yet thought of.
That would be really useful. Thank you, Emma.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor John, and then I've got Councillor Drake. Go in.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to ask, are we going to look at service plan actions? But this is part of the report tonight, on the report that came to us.
We can. Are there any particular ones that you want?
Yeah,
to
it's
raise?
just,
Yeah.
it's one I want to ask about, and that's on page 112. And it refers to the implement the land-based flood risk management scheme. It's NS/A Regeneration 3.
All right, at the bottom of page 112. Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Well, obviously, you know, it says here, it gives you an indication what's been done so far, but all I wanted to ask was whether agreement has been reached with anybody yet, and how many are being interviewed for the land, because this is to approach landowners for making buns on their fields. Now, I just wondered how many landowners are involved, and have we made any progress with any landowner? Now, I don't expect an answer tonight, but probably I could ask for an email response on this, because, you know, this is going on and I know where we are on this, but to be honest with you, I've got grave doubts as to whether we'll make any progress with landowners. So that's what I'm concerned about. And if we don't make progress with landowners, this scheme now has gone on for the last 19 years, basically. So I think we've got to the stage that the Welsh Government has increased the funding to give to this scheme. I spoke to Jane Hutt today, and she said there's funding waiting to be used. And quite honestly, we've appointed 3, if not 4, consultants on this scheme, and we're still not going very far, I don't think. So I'd just like an update on that side of it, because we can't talk about this outside in public meetings at the moment. But what I am concerned about is, are we making progress with landowners? How many, if we are, and how many are we trying to make agreements with? Is it 4, 6, 2? You know, that's the question mark. And obviously, people are getting very anxious there, because every time you get heavy rain, someone's sending me an email asking me what's happening. So I just wanted to ask that, basically. So I don't want an answer tonight. I don't think you will answer me tonight. So I'll leave it until you can respond. Thank you very much.
Okay. Sorry, Chair, I can just give a very quick update. There is a report due to come to Cabinet. It'll either be the second meeting in January or the first one in February, giving an update on the scheme and also the land negotiation. But there has been progress on the land negotiation, but I will send you a separate email on that, so you're fully updated as a local member.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emma, and thank you, Gwyn. Councillor Drake?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to what Stefan said, and I'm glad this report is going to come to us about Porthcurry. It's very close to my heart. I used to spend all my youth down there playing, probably causing a lot of mischief as well. And thank heavens we never succumbed in this early 60s, when Billy Butlin wanted to buy it to build his camp. And thank heavens for that, because it is a wonderful place. And I thoroughly enjoyed myself. And I can remember going there watching the football and everything, because there was quite a few football pitches down there as well.
Okay, thank you, Pam.
And no glamping either.
No.
You couldn't have glamping, you'd probably drown.
Let's not open that one. Councillor Rowlands, did you have another question?
It wasn't a question. I did raise a point. I just wanted an answer from Marcus in relation to the signs. You know, does he have a plan to combat it, really? It just looked like I was being overlooked. It may not be. You never know.
No,
Christmas.
Wouldn't do that. Wouldn't do that too late.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the signage Emma and I will speak to colleagues to ensure that signage is put back up if it's been pulled down. The signage is part of a wider scheme, as Councillor Rowlands knows, but it is useful to know that it's being pulled down. Emma, we will speak to colleagues and ensure that is looked at.
Yeah, I've already followed it up, Councillor Rowlands, with an email this evening already after your question.
Okay, thank you. Right, I don't think there's anybody else waiting to speak. I think I've managed to get everybody in. So really, it's what we've talked about there tonight. Is Gwyn, you're going to be responded to via email, and Emma's already said about the report that is due to come then after Christmas. Leighton will take that point forward, and officers are already dealing with that as we're actually here in the meeting. I think then that there aren't any recommendations for us to go actually back to Cabinet. So are we happy to accept this report? Okay, thank you very much. Right, now we'll move on to item number 7, which is the Revenue and Capital Monitoring Report for the period 1st of April to the 30th of September 2020. So I think, Matthew, it's
yes,
it's
yeah.
over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. So yeah, the first finance report tonight is concerned with this financial year. So it's the first 6 months of the year, so to the end of September. The report, as usual, goes through the revenue budget and then onto capital. So the with regard to the revenue budget, there's a table in paragraph 2.2, which shows the current projections against the budget. And as we've projected for quite a few months now, we're showing an overspend for neighbourhood and transport services of 750,000, and that's to be covered from reserves. However, we're also showing an overspend within building services, currently projected at 815,000. Again, this is to be covered from financial reserves that the council holds. So the report then goes on to discuss some of the reasons for these overspends. Neighbourhood service and transport, as we've known for a while, is mainly due to the waste collection service, and issues there in that there's a lot of downtime in travelling to Cardiff with all our waste currently. We're obviously, we're in the process of building, potentially building a transfer station at Atlantic train estate to ensure there's less distance to be travelled with our waste. So that causes pressure on transport budgets and staffing budgets. We've also had pressure due to giving our staff a 10% uplift from April to August during the start of the COVID pandemic. This was given to several groups of staff, waste being one of those, and that cost around 175,000. So again, that will be covered from reserves, and there's also be a lot of pressure on our budgets due to the cost of disposing of treating our recycling, and the cost of treating it via commingled markets. And now we have started to separate out our recycling. We're seeing that we're actually getting an income for a lot of our recycling, rather than paying around £100 a tonne that we're paying at the moment to treat commingled recycling. So there's a big difference there, and going forward should help our budgets. With regard building maintenance, the pressure on those budgets is mainly due to, well, virtually all due to the COVID pandemic. And when we first went into lockdown, a lot of the work of the building maintenance team sort of stopped overnight. A lot of the work is undertaken within tenants' houses and public buildings, schools, etc. So a lot of that work obviously dried up overnight. Tenants didn't want people in their houses, schools being shut, etc. Caused a lot of our work to stop. We're still obviously paying our employees, but they're not then producing the same level as work as they have done previously. And the report sort of discusses that. With regards other areas of the committee, so regeneration, projecting on budget and development management, even though income levels have dropped. Some of that has been covered by Welsh Government grant. So therefore the budget for this year looks okay in those services. Report then goes on to discuss efficiency targets for this year, and they're shown at Appendix 2. For this year, they're only £83,000, and they're currently shown as they're going to be met. And then the report then goes on to discuss the capital budget. The report discusses various schemes, and also the full capital programme, and the spend to date is shown at Appendix 3 to the report. So that's about it. So if anyone's got any questions on the report, I'll take them now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Do we have anybody? Sorry, Councillor John, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Madam Chair, I should say. I made you the mayor yet. Matthew, what I'd like to ask you about is Appendix 3. I'm talking about Landmace Flood Management Scheme again. Maybe you could update me after this, not from tonight, obviously, but it's on Appendix 3. It's about 3/4 way down the page. It's a Mike Clog scheme, Landmace Flood Management Scheme. We spent 61,000 there. But of course, this is up till September. Okay, 61,000 up to September there. Now, obviously, the budget last year that came through the budget, but it was allocated 796,000 on the budget last year for the Landmace flood scheme. What I was going to ask is how much is been spent since 30th of September, and how much is left to probably slip over at the end of this year? It's a bit early to ask that yet, because we don't know how much we're going to spend yet over the next couple of months.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor John. I think the spend to date is actually zero showing on the report. The 61,000 is the budget for this year. So to date, or this financial year anyway, the first 6 months there's been zero spend.
I see.
Yeah, so the budget for this year is 61. We're projecting to spend 61 at the moment. However, I don't know if Emma can update on that.
Yeah, I can give you, I've had a recent capital monitoring meeting, Gwyn, and I can give you a separate update on what the position is likely to be at the end of the financial year. Are you okay if I do that separately?
Fine.
Is
But
that all right?
I was just going back on the capital budget of last year, 1920. That's what I was going back on. So I leave you have a look at that and come back to me.
Yeah. So do you just to clarify, you want to know what's been spent today, or what's been spent today as of today, and what is likely to be spent by the end of the financial year, just an estimate.
We're going to slip the rest over. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you for that, Emma. Was anything else, Gwyn, or was that everything, Gwyn?
Oh, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor William. Oh, sorry, just bear with me, Stefan. Catherine, was there anything that you wanted to come in with? Your hand was up before we move on.
I just wanted to draw your attention, Chair. Councillor Robertson has said in the chat that he'd like to speak, but his hands up function isn't working.
Right, okay, then I shall add him to the list. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor William.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. By the way, thanks for the presentation. I just wanted a clarification on the good news about the recycling costs, the savings that we're making. You mentioned the figures there. Could you just go over them again with me? Sorry, I've got a memory like a sieve. Thank you.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, so obviously with regard the recycling that we're now selling. It obviously varies depending on the material. So obviously metals and things like that get a lot more income than things like paper and plastics. However, we do, I think for most things, other than maybe it's either paper or card, I think we still pay a small amount. But most other things we are getting an income on.
Paper.
Yeah, paper, yeah. But yeah, commingled recycling costs us around £100 a tonne to treat. So seeing as we recycle, I think we recycle the best part of about 14,000 tonnes. Yeah, 14,000 tonnes a year. Obviously, £100 times that amount is a big amount. It's over 1.3, 1.4 million. So the potential savings are there. However, obviously the method of picking up the recycling now is more time consuming. So you need more vehicles. However, we are picking up more things on the same vehicle. Obviously, food waste is now picked up on the same vehicle as recycling. Previously, we had 2 separate vehicles for that. So even though there is a slight increase in resources, probably not massive compared to the saving that we'll be making on the treatment costs. So hopefully within around a year, 18 months time, once we're fully rolled out, then we should hopefully see some savings coming through to the budget, or if not savings, at least getting back to our base budget where we should be. Is that okay?
Yeah. Stefan, you're on mute. Thanks.
Sorry, I was just going to say that's excellent. Thanks very much indeed. Brilliant.
Okay, thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Robertson waiting to speak next.
Thank you, Chair. These 2 questions probably don't have anything to do with this meeting. I probably shouldn't be asking, but I thought I'd ask them anyway. In light of the recent explosion in Bristol, is this going to affect our plans for the joint biomass and recycling plant in Cardiff? I mean, are we worried about that? And my second question is, with the rollout of the vaccination programme for COVID, is that going to impact on the Vale Council in terms of cost? Are we going to be involved in that in a cost negative exercise?
Right, I'm not sure those are questions that we can answer here tonight, Andy. Looking at the officers now, Emma, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I can come back on the Bristol explosion and give him an answer. Is it okay to give you a written answer on that? Because I have asked the question myself, but I just prefer if I could give you a written answer. Is that okay, Councillor Robertson?
That's fine, Emma. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
No problem.
Sorry, I don't know about vaccinations. Sorry, I can't help on that one.
No, yeah.
We haven't been approached to help in that, have we?
Yeah.
The Vale Council hasn't been approached to help in the vaccination rollout?
I think it's been done by the NHS, isn't it? Marcus might know more because of his role on SLT.
Chair,
Sorry,
can I come in, Chair?
As far as I'm aware, it's the NHS actually, isn't it, rolling it out? As far as I'm aware, but perhaps we can find out some more information and come back to you. Andy, is that okay?
Thank you. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll ask Tracy Dickinson to come back to you because she's involved in the vaccination programme. So I'll drop her a line and ask her to come back to you direct, if that's okay, Chair.
Thank you, Emma.
Okay. Lovely, thank you.
Chair.
Okay,
Chair, can I come in a second?
Is that Councillor Driscoll?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I was about to call you in. So do you want to?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. As for the explosion in Bristol, I think the plant there is very similar to the one they're building on Cogmoors in Dinas Powys, in between Dinas and Sully. So maybe we can have a good look at that sometime. Okay.
Cause for concern.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, Emma is actually going to come back with a written response around that, but thank you. Okay, I've got I've got Councillor King just waiting to come in, but I just want to check there's nobody else in the committee now who'd like to speak. No? Okay, Councillor King.
Thanks so much, Chair. It was just Stefan's comment about selling recyclate. The only thing that I was extremely excited that we could actually gain some income from clean recyclate. But what everyone is warning me is as more and more councils copy us and go to segregated collections, it is likely the price will drop. So I was told not to get too excited, so I thought I'd better just add that caveat to Matthew's statement.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, because I was excited. There you are. Now you've just spoiled Christmas, haven't you? So, but okay, right. If there's nobody else wishes to speak, thank you, Matthew, for bringing that report. And that we just note the revised budget then for 2020, 2021. And as I said, there will be some officers going directly back to councillors with their responses. So thank you for that. Moving on to item number 8 then, which is looking forward to the next budget. So Matthew, I think this is you again. This is the initial revenue budget proposals.
Yes,
2021,
thank you, Chair. Yeah, the next report is the revenue budget for next financial year and initial proposals. So the recommendation of this report is that the committee consider the cost pressures and savings shown in the report and any comments fed back to corporate performance as the lead scrutiny committee on the budget. So just a bit of background, we haven't yet received our initial settlement or provisional settlement from Welsh Government for next financial year. So currently we're still in the dark a bit as to how much funding we have for next financial year. We're due to get that on the 22nd of December, so a week's time. That's just a provisional settlement. And then the final settlement is due to be received on the 2nd of March 2021. So that doesn't leave much time to then set the budget, which has to be set by the 11th of March. So obviously a lot of the planning around the budget has to be done now, and departments highlight any cost pressures on their budget, and also any savings that can be made are highlighted. So the report sort of discusses that. The report models a few different scenarios. So we've modelled a cash neutral settlement from Welsh Government, so same as last year. And we've also modelled a 1% reduction each year for the next 3 years, and also a 1% increase each year. You know, as to how that plays out, we don't know yet, but that obviously gives us a range then of shortfalls within the budget. We've also then highlighted any cost pressures on the budget, and for the council as a whole, £10 million worth of cost pressures have been highlighted over the next 3 years. For this committee alone, that's it's around about £1 million of cost pressures have been highlighted. And they're provided Appendix 1 to the report. And then we've also got a savings target for next financial year. For this committee is currently 66,000, and for the council as a whole is 116,000. So quite small numbers, and that was intentional in a way because we've had so many years of savings that, you know, services were failing to meet previous year's savings, and then they had new year's savings coming forward. So it was felt that a slight break was needed due to the settlement last year being quite good. You know, a break in those savings was needed in order for services to catch up with their previous savings. So the report then in paragraph 2.7 provides a table which shows the shortfall under the various scenarios I was describing earlier. So it ranges from about a £14 million shortfall over the next 3 years to a £26 million shortfall based on different scenarios. So if we only had a £14 million shortfall, that would be 1% increase in our settlement from Welsh Government, but it would also mean increasing council tax up to the Welsh average. So that would be 8.4% for next year, 4.6% for the years after that. So obviously that is a big increase there. Whereas the other scenarios have modelled a 4.9% council tax increase, which was the same as last year. But these scenarios also assume that all the cost pressures will be funded, so £10 million of cost pressures, whereas in reality there will be some balance. Some cost pressures may be awarded, but a lot of those cost pressures, services will probably just need to find within their current budget. So yeah, the report highlights that. But obviously over the next 3 years that there is likely to be a shortfall, so it's how we deal with that. The report then goes on to provide an overall summary of the budget for next year, and that's shown at Appendix 3. So it shows the changes to the budget currently, and again just highlights the cost pressures and the savings needed for next year. And the report then just goes into the next steps required then. So the committee, if they do have any questions, or if they do have any views on the cost pressures that have been raised, the main sort of cost pressures raised are the usual ones, such as additional money for potholes and things like that. So they are items that are required. It's not just a wish list. So yeah, if members have any views or any savings they think could be made, or any other cost pressures that you think need to be raised, yeah, we need to feed those back to corporate resources. Okay, I'll take any questions if anyone has any.
Okay, thank you, Matthew.
Thanks.
I mean, you've got it all laid out there in the report, and obviously the appendices as well. I don't think that there's any actual sort of hidden surprises within our cost pressures, as Matthew's already referred to. These, or most of these, are sort of constant cost pressures going from year to year. And obviously our efficiencies, or proposed efficiencies, are quite minimal for this year. So, Councillor John, did you want to ask something?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. All I wanted to say is we're in the same boat as we were this time last year. Until the Welsh Government come up with a figure, then we can't really determine where we're going or our views of where we could go. I do feel, that the Welsh Government now are coming later down the line. We'd be far better off discussing this in January meeting rather than a December meeting, because it makes it very difficult for Matthew to do his report for us, and plus the fact for us to come to some sort of final agreement or some sort of discussion about how we're going to address these. And another question, of course, one year the Welsh Government gave money towards potholes. I mean, we just don't know what the future is at this moment. So I think I haven't got really any comment to make on this tonight. It's very concerning, obviously, but at the same time, what can we do?
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. I think the one thing that we can do, if we feed back to corporate resources, is just, or if nothing else, just expressing our concerns over the late settlement, which has happened now over the last few years, hasn't it? Which I say doesn't make it easy for officers or for Cabinet then to actually set those budgets. So, yeah, okay. So, are there any other points or any from councillors at this stage? No? Okay, thank you for that, Matthew. Right, we'll feed that back with that comment, just expressing our concern about that issue. Okay, moving on to the last item on the agenda then, which is the initial capital programme for 2021 to 22, and which then goes through to 25 to 26. So, Matthew again.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so a similar report, but obviously dealing with the capital programme this time. Again, a similar scenario with the announcement from Welsh Government. So that is due the same time as the revenue. So in a week's time, we should get provisional settlement. So again, we'll be better placed to know how much money we have to fund schemes. So again, we can only do what we can at the moment and sort of make estimates as to how much funding we'll have for next year. So the report sets out the initial proposals for the capital programme in Appendix 1. So you can see there that items that are already in the programme. However, on top of this, we make capital bids, and the number of bids coming from departments in this committee are probably the highest throughout the council. So we've had 9 from Neighbourhood and Transport Services and 7 from Regeneration and Planning, and there were only 19 bids for the whole of the council. So it's an area where we obviously do have a lot of assets, and we need a lot of money to maintain those assets. So and those number of bids were scaled back as well. I think initially within Emma's area alone, we had nearly 20 bids. So we've scaled those back to the sort of 9 highest priority bids, just due to the lack of funding. So so the programs, the report sets out the bids at appendix. Sorry, appendix 2 to the report. Yeah, so over the 5-year programme, the amount of bids that we've put in is nearly £19 million. But almost 12 million of that is for road resurfacing, as we need just over £2 million every year just to maintain the steady state of the road, so not deteriorating. However, in the programme currently, we've only got 300,000 set aside in the capital programme, so we've bid for an additional £2.2 million next year, obviously just to maintain the state of the road as it is. So as Councillor John mentioned, you know, in the past we have had funding from Welsh Government for things like this, but as yet no notification whether that funding will continue for next year. So we've obviously got to put in a bid and hope that these schemes will get funded. So yeah, so if members have any views on the bids that we've submitted, or there's any bids that they don't feel are on there that should be on there, or if they support the bids, then yeah, if the views could be fed back, and they could be fed back to corporate resources then. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. So yeah, there are a number of schemes there, and you know, at the very least, they have been scaled back to those priority bids. Then, Councillor John.
Well, obviously, Madam Chairman, we're exactly the same as the previous one on initial funding. But I think probably all the members here are concerned about the surface of roads and everything in their particular wards, and I'm sure we'd support funding a bid for the roads. So basically, Matthew has just put forward that we be looking for funding for the roads, if whether Welsh Government make it or not. So taking it for granted that we get nothing from the Welsh Government, I certainly feel that we should be supporting road resurfacing, because it'll only get worse. And I'm sure in our area, particularly in all areas, wherever you go across the Vale, there are some very rough roads. So I see Andrew nodding his head there. I think you would probably have the same in Dennis Powys as we have down Lantwood Major Way. So I think it's a general problem. So I would suggest that we forward that suggestion to corporate resources, that we would like to think that there would be funding for the road schemes. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it is actually at the very top of the list as well, as it's like the first priority, which is, as I say, hopefully there will be some money coming forward from Welsh Government for that. But yes, it's a pressure, and it's down as a cost pressure as well. So is everybody in the committee happy to agree that? Oh, sorry about that, I decided to have a cough. Okay, have we got anybody else or any other thoughts around that? Are we happy now to forward that with that suggestion of the prioritising of the road resurfacing, particularly if we don't get any grant from Welsh Government? So happy to agree that. Lovely. Okay. Well, I haven't got any items under part 1 which are urgent, or under part 2 as well. Oh, bear with me. So I would just like to thank everybody for the meeting tonight, despite the difficulties we sort of got through that. And just like to wish everybody peaceful and very safe Christmas and New Year, and look forward to seeing everybody now in 2021. So thank you and good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Good night.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all.
Have a good Christmas.